Refreshing SAP HANA with Libelle SystemCopy. My name is Bernd Bayer. I'm a Senior Solution Architect with Libelle. I'm also VP of our US operation. I'm joined by Vamsi Mailabarapu. He is a Senior Technical Consultant and also our Service Delivery Manager. The webcast today is going to be heavily tilted towards SAP HANA. At the same time, everything we talk about today and everything you see today applies pretty much the same to any of the legacy platform. So 80% of the workflow is pretty much the same between SAP HANA and non-SAP HANAs. But some of the highlights and some of the topics we want to talk about today is specifically around HANA DB, considerations when we are refreshing HANA, S4HANA, a couple of thoughts around single tenant versus multi-tenant installation, specifically for backup and restore, and HANA Snapshots if you want to use them as part of the DB copy, the cloud orchestration and provisioning, the HANA Snapshots, the BDLS opportunities. They're not really new in regards to HANA, but some of the new NetWeaver versions have new BDLS options. We want to cover that. And then we have two specific issues and topics we want to talk about: HANA DB cockpit settings and HANA DB users during pre and post processing. And then also we're going to show a live refresh of a HANA system during the webcast. Vamsi is going to take care of that live presentation of the HANA. I'm looking forward to the presentation. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A features in the GoToWebinar interface. We're going to see the questions on our screens, and we have a formal Q&A session at the end where we're going to talk about the questions and try to answer them. With that, let's get started. I want to introduce our company. Libelle is headquartered in Stuttgart, Germany. That's where the company was started in the mid-90s. We have been around for more than almost 25 years now. We have more than 1,500 installations at more than 400 customers worldwide. We service some of the largest SAP installations worldwide. So we count 8 of the global Fortune 50 customers as our customers running Libelle software. And we used to work with some of the largest companies. We used to work with medium-sized companies, small companies. Everybody having SAP is our potential target customer. And as you can see, the last bullet point, 80% of our customers are SAP customers. So this is the space we are operating in. We have 3 main lines of business or divisions. We have a data replication division, which is the original software we started the company with, which is still carrying a lot of our business, where we support replicating different databases supported by SAP, but also in the meantime, non-SAP systems like Progress or MySQL. The topic we talk about today is the system refresh automation. In its core, it's the Libelle SystemCopy. We have an add-on for client copies, data masking, DB copy. We have a system clone now, and these are the topics we're going to talk about today. And then there are other solutions we are offering around data masking, IDOC monitoring, SAP monitoring, and then lift and shift cloud migrations. We have a couple of more webcasts coming up this week. I have an overview at the end of the presentation, but specifically around IDOC monitoring, data masking, and lift and shift cloud migrations. There are webcasts scheduled this week. With that, let's get started with system refreshes. And we start setting the stage by defining what we are talking about. When we say system copy, or when we say system refresh or system copy or copy back, as some customers refer to it, we refer to the homogeneous system copy defined by SAP, going from production to QA. Sometimes we go from production to sandbox. Sometimes customers refresh sandbox from QAS. So that's the core workflow. There are some additional workflows like client copies going from QAS or from sandbox to a development system where you might have multiple clients, or you prefer a client copy over a system copy for development systems. Client copies can be local, they can be remote. And then in the newest iterations, we're also working on system clones where you copy a sandbox system to a project system without permanently having the project system sitting around and collecting dust. So some of the drivers impacting system refresh automation, specifically from the SAP HANA angle. One is the standardization and simplification with the SAP HANA platform. SAP really has the situation where they had to support 5 different database platforms, 5 different OS platforms, and with SAP HANA, all of that is becoming one. That's good for SAP. It's good for the customers because even customers, they had multiple installations. Sometimes they have DB2 and Oracle or Oracle and HANA. We have the partners like us. We are supporting 5 different platforms. That's all going to be one platform in the future. The IT becoming a broker of service is specifically with looking at technologies like cloud, AWS. When you look at it, you have a complete stack of IT services and data center services. They are all available at your fingertip. So we are really not having a core competency of being able to build a data center. Everybody can now operate a data center, and IT becomes more and more a broker of services, connecting customer requests with available technology. The continued automation, we fully embrace automation, and we think everybody should embrace automation because if it's going to happen no matter what, and we want to be off the forefront of automating things because it's going to be much more better in terms of operating. There are a couple of very interesting topics on the market. There are going to be more topics coming up. So we don't want to spend time doing system refreshes when we could spend time talking about blockchain or machine learning. And then finally, we see SAP HANA transformations as this big window of opportunity where everybody is building a new platform, and you can really set the stage for the next 5 to 10 or maybe even 15 years of an architecture that is driving the next 10 to 15 years of how you operate SAP. So this is the moment where you really want to think about what kind of tools I want to implement. And from our perspective, we hope that you give system copy automation a thought. The last step in setting the stage for system copies before we talk about technologies, the top 10 refresh challenges. It's time intensive, know-how intensive, labor intensive. The refresh process is simply complicated. Every SAP administrator is knowing that. We have multiple systems per refresh. The systems are down during the refresh. It's highly complex, repetitive. One of the core issues or the thing that keeps taking time is BDLS. Small mistakes can have big impacts. And then we also see more and more requests coming from the business for system refreshes where we can deliver 1 or 2 a year, but the business really wants to see refreshes quarterly or sometimes even monthly. So what we are proposing is this idea of a software-defined system refresh. And this is, again, supporting the concept of IT becoming a broker of services. So you have a predefined workflow, a predefined algorithm, which is defining the system refresh. The process is really predefined by SAP. There are specific SAP and post-processing tasks. There are things you have to do on the operating system. There are items around orchestration. You have to copy a database. You have to potentially do a data masking. And this is IT. This can be all programmatically be predefined, defined with parameters, and you just keep executing it. And then you as an IT team can focus on managing the execution, managing the requests, and focus on exceptions, on not really doing the actual execution of the refresh. So Libelle SystemCopy is a software that automates system refreshes end to end. There are 3 components. This has an automation framework, which is basically an orchestration software that executes steps within SAP, outside SAP, steps on the database, steps on the operating system. And the second component is a task repository. The task repository is a predefined workflow coming from Libelle, supported by Libelle, maintained by Libelle, how we think you should do your system refreshes. And when I say we think, it's really what SAP says you're supposed to do, what our customers fine-tune the process with and our input. So the task repository is really a standard workflow that grew over the last 10, 15 years of doing system refreshes. And the definitions by SAP, because we really don't reinvent the wheel. We are embracing automation following the SAP standards. And SAP has specific reports, specific tables that need to be touched as part of the refresh. And all we do is automating them. So how is a refresh workflow working? In order to do a system refresh, we assume you have a production system, you have a QAS system, and we talk system, homogeneous system copy for now. The system clone is going to be slightly different. The client copy is almost the same, except it's not a DB copy. It's going to be a copy inside the SAP system. But let's look at this from a perspective of a homogeneous system copy. The assumption is there's a QAS system that exists, that is already there, that needs to be refreshed. And what we want to do before the refresh is exporting all the settings we want to keep from the existing Q settings, like users, RFC settings, or anything we want to keep on the QAS system. So all of that gets exported before the database copy phase is completely overriding the QAS database with the production database. In the post-processing, we are importing all the settings that were exported in pre-processing, and we run all the post-processing steps required and recommended, including steps like BDLS. And finally, there is a masking phase. If you want to obfuscate data, replace names with different names that are masked, we have a solution for that as well. All of that is controlled by a master server and controlled by you via a graphical user interface. Our master can manage one system refresh, one configuration. It can manage one system refresh with 10 different configurations. Some of our biggest customers have around 300 to 500 configurations for hundreds of SAP systems. So there's really no limit on how many systems, how many templates you can manage with our master server. And also from the GUI side, it's a client-server architecture. So each of your administrator can have their own GUI, their own roles and responsibilities, and access to the different systems that need to be refreshed. Two more topics around the generic system refresh before we go more into the HANA refresh, which is the task and connector types. So I mentioned earlier, we have a framework which is doing and is responsible for the automation. Now within this framework, we have generic tasks, and all the workflows we are providing from Libelle as part of our repository are based on either any of those tasks. And also, if you add your own workflows, you can pick and choose which kind of task you want. So you can export specific additional custom tables, you can execute an ABAP report, and so on. So from the categories, we have table and DB operations that are mostly R3 trans-based exports, delete imports, which are also happening in parallel. And then we have database connectors, anything you want to execute directly on the database. We have SQL connectors for all the databases as SAP is supporting. We support Unix, Linux, and Windows shell scripts. We can execute SAP functions, and we can provide a workflow management, which is breakpoints, sync task. If you have 3 systems you want to refresh, we can have them communicate with each other that, let's say, the ECC refresh waits for the BW refresh to finish pre-processing before they both go into the copy phase. And then we have email status tasks. One example is transport management. Before we re-import the transports into the queue system, we can send an email to the administrator listing all the transports that will go back in the QA system, and then wait for the admin to confirm before we continue the workflow. This is an overview of all the areas that are covered by Libelle, and actually all is not correct. There are more areas covered by Libelle, but I try to highlight the most critical and most important T-codes. So anything you see on the screen is covered in one way or the other by Libelle SystemCopy out of the standard repository. So with that, I want to continue the slide presentation with topics around system copies for HANA, S4 HANA, and Suite on HANA before we look at the live demo. So first of all, we were looking at our customers migrating to HANA-DB, migrating to S4, and we were looking at what is really different between HANA and non-HANA systems. The biggest thing we see is the higher grade of standardization. And that's what I mentioned earlier. It's really SAP going from 5 different database platforms to 1, maybe 2, potentially 3, if you think about HANA, and then probably Sybase is going to be second. But SAP long-term wants to get rid of all the other databases. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a 3 to 5 year period. But at the end, I think in the future, everybody's going to run his SAP or her SAP on SAP HANA. The HANA DB is, from our perspective, much easier to manage than other databases. There are much less moving pieces compared to other databases that have been around for much longer. So we think the backup, the restore, and the log replay is much easier to manage than it is for legacy databases. It has the potential for speed, and I intentionally put the word potential in there. HANA by default is going to be faster than other databases because it's in memory, and then it has this massive memory and CPU. So that system is going to be fast, but you're also going to supply HANA with the algorithms to be faster. So if you move Suite on HANA, Suite NetWeaver from Oracle to Suite on HANA, it's going to be faster, but really only if you go to S4, it takes advantage of all the potential you have for the speed. And we try to do the same from a system refresh perspective. We really want to give the HANA good algorithms to work with that we can take advantage of the good hardware, because it's not going to be just fast by itself or fast enough by itself. SAP NetWeaver is not going to change. We looked at S4 HANA. What's the difference between an S4 HANA refresh and a Suite on HANA refresh? From a basis perspective, really not too much. So NetWeaver doesn't really change with the HANA yet. And then the last 2 points, it is a driver for cloud and virtualization and a driver for transformation and consolidations. We see that HANA is this opportunity where customers look at the architecture, look at the infrastructure and see, now this is the architecture for the next 10 years. Let's consolidate. Let's get rid of all the things we potentially did wrong in the past, or we had these spin-offs which we never integrated. This is the time to consolidate. I have 6 HANA-specific topics I want to go through item by item, just to give you some insights, what you're going to look at once you are on HANA, or if you're already on HANA, things you might already know. BDLS is not really a HANA-specific topic, but I just included it because there are some new things coming with NetWeaver 7.5, which BDLS algorithms change between older 7.3, newer 7.3, and then newer 7.5. User management, DBA Cockpit, and then a couple of thoughts on the S4 refreshes. So first is, as part of the system copy, we need to copy the database. In the past, sometimes we did a fully integrated copy phase. So we do the SAP pre-processing, we fully orchestrate, let's say, an Oracle database backup, database copy, database restore, sometimes based on RMAN, sometimes based on an existing backup. We do it the same for HANA-DB, and there are 2 options. One is a backup restore, to say, let's trigger backup, copy the backup files if necessary, if the QA system is on a different storage, and then do the restore. The second option is doing the snapshots. So we have a fully automated way of doing snapshots for HANA, and that can sit on AWS, can sit on any platform. And then the limitation is really, and that's the point of single tenant versus multi-tenant. Snapshots currently only work for single tenants. So consider if you go on multi-tenant installations, you cannot really do snapshots on multi-tenant systems. We work a lot on our BDLS implementations, and we are in the process of releasing a new BDLS version, which is SAP based versus older implementations which are database based. And we always have this philosophy of isolating the big tables from the small tables and run BDLS separately on the big tables. And we have achieved dramatic improvements from especially legacy systems, but even a HANA standard BDLS that is much faster than a non-HANA BDLS. We even reduced the HANA BDLS dramatically by having better algorithms which we feed the database. SAP users or users in the HANA environment, we have three kinds of users. They don't really belong on the same slide, but I just included it as a SAP user. That's already fully automated, always has been within SystemCopy. And we have two more kind of users which we need to look at, which is HANADB schema user, which is potentially different between QA than productions. We handle that in SystemCopy. And then there are HANADB admin user that is currently not fully automated yet. We have a process of creating missing users roles, create a list, and then support the recreation of those users. And we are working on a solution on fully automating the managing of the HANADB admin users. An outlook, we have more and more requests for the HANA Cockpit. And this is something we're currently working on, either in Q4 or Q1 2019, we're going to have a solution to manage all and any settings in the HANA Cockpit. So there's the Access Engine. We think the HANA Cockpit is long-term going to replace the HANA Studio. So we want to make sure we are on top of things when it comes to the HANA Cockpit. It's not used by too many people yet. And backup jobs, which is scheduled in the cockpit, you can also schedule in the standard transaction. But this is a use case which we see more and more coming for the future. Finally, S4 refreshes, observations. We really don't see too many changes. There are a couple of smaller items we see. SAP S4 always comes with Fiori, so we do the first or did the first couple of Fiori refreshes. So there's not really too much you have to refresh on Fiori, but it's a standard ABAP system, so you can do a standard refresh. We see a couple of considerations, client copies on HANA. So there are a lot of things you need to do in the client copy in terms of reports and settings. Otherwise, the client copy for HANA is going to be really, really slow. So there are a couple of considerations we incorporated in our software. When we see people going to HANA, we see a lot of customers not even talking to us because they're completely focused on business transformation, and system refreshes are really a side topic. Once they are done with the transformation, they need the refreshes. But before that, a lot of people don't even consider refreshes. So a lot of focus goes in a different way. So with that, I want to start introducing the live demonstration, and Vamsi is going to get ready to show the live demo. What I want to start with is introducing the demo environment we configured. So we have two SAP systems we configured, and all of that, as you see from the symbols, run on the Amazon Web Services. It could run on-premise, it can run on AWS, it can run on Azure. It doesn't really make a difference. Of course, whatever infrastructure you have, your private clouds. And this specifically is running Snapshots. We have a graphical user interface, and then we have the complete workflow pre-configured and pre-automated. What we are demonstrating in the demo is really a production to QA refresh. We do the pre-processing, and then for the database copy, we are creating snapshots. So we are snapping the production database, attach it to QA, and then do the post-processing. We are snapping only the data, so we don't touch the logs currently. This is the fastest, and it serves the purpose. So there's really not too much value doing a point-in-time recovery. That's why we simply stick with the data. And then the whole refresh would take 126 minutes, or does take 126 minutes. We pre-recorded this, and it's much easier to concentrate. We don't want to sit there and wait for 10 minutes for BDLS to finish, which is, I think, about the time we use. But the actual execution times are 1 minute for check, 6 minutes for pre. The copy phase took 67 minutes, the post-processing 52 minutes. So we do a refresh in 126 minutes. It's a SAP system with, I think, 250 gigabytes. It's EDIS, so there's not too much transactions in the system. In reality, I think we can get a HANA refresh done in 6 to 8 hours. But in this case, 126 minutes, and we're going to look at a 24-minute refresh actually now. So with that, I would hand over the presenter role to Vamsi.
So I'm going ahead and starting. These are two EDS systems running on HANA database 2.0 with SP2. You have PDB and Q database here, and HANA PRD is a production system. HANA QAS is the test system. And you see the schemas there, SAP ABAP 1 on both sides. Let me go ahead and show the software. So we have the software pre-installed. I have the configuration here prepared. The configuration is LSC PRD QAS running on the quality system, HANA QAS. Let's go at the OS level first and have a look at the software. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you see my PRD system, right side QAS. I have two agents running, one as CDADM and the second one as root. Again, you don't have to run the agent as root unless you want to leverage the snapshot technologies, because once you do that, you have to leverage unmounting and remounting your disks and things like that. So I have two agents running, but typically, if you're doing regular database copy, it's only CDADM user. I log in with my credentials here. You can always integrate your LDAP and all the Active Directory settings. And once the configuration is loaded, you'll be seeing that it's loading from the HANA QA system. I have my systems defined here. As you see, I have 4 agents running, 2 on each system. And if I drill down for each system, we have the role for system. In this case, I have defined target SAP and target database. And then I defined SAP data. So I have to define the CDADM user and passwords. It all depends upon whether you want to leverage, to what extent you want to leverage the tool. So you define the client information, you define the database information. If you don't want to define the CDADM user password, there are some things that you don't want to do, like bringing SAP down and things like that. And I do the same thing for my production system. Again, production is totally optional. If you want to do a database copy, you could always do that manually. And the tool completely runs in isolation on the target system itself. And then I have my different tasks here. Basically, there are 4 phases. We have a check phase where we run checks on the system, basically collecting information about your source and target system. Again, this is totally optional. It has 0 impact on the refresh quality. It just wants you that you are having different patch levels in between source and target. So if you want to leverage that, you need to put a user on the source system. And then we have the pre-phase where we do all the exports. And then you see the copy tasks here. We're going to do a deep dive on these tasks as we progress into the refresh. Once copy is done, we do the post-processing where we delete all the data that we got from source system, do the imports, and then we go ahead and do the BDLS part. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A section, and we'll be glad to answer those questions. Let me just run through this whole thing here. So as you see here, we have some special handling for BDLS. I'm going to talk about that in brief. Let me go ahead and start the execution here. Now the execution is starting, and you should see the workflow running through. And first, the check phase runs. So as I said, check phase is basically checking both source and target systems, whether they're on the same SAP level, same kernels, whether the information that you provided in the software, like the clients, whether we are able to log into the clients and things like that. Once check phase is successful, we straight away run through the pre-phase. If you see any errors in check phase, you might want to fix them. But typically, you have to know whether that error is something which is critical before you proceed further. And then in the pre-phase, let me show you a small example. I put SMO2 to broadcast a message system copy is running. Let me refresh the GUI here. And you see the message broadcasted. So it broadcasts only once, and there are multiple settings that you can do. And currently user export is happening. It's going to take some time. So let's go back to SMO2 task and do a deep dive there. So for each task, we have unique identifier, and we have to flag what are default clients for the task to run. where should the task run, in which location it's in pre-phase, and the location is 5, where it should run on target SAP. And then you have your different parameters for the task, which you can tweak, like expiration date, deletion date, and all the messages. And we look for these return codes before we proceed to the next task. Let's look at the log file here. And I am showing the log file here, and you see that we have broadcasted the message, and it says message successfully added to the system. And that's typically the case for most of the logs that you see. So we are trying to leverage the SAP standard toolset to automate the workflow. Like, for example, this task is an R3 trans export task. And if you look at the log, it's standard R3 trans log. So you can always add, remove tables, or deactivate and activate tasks. So user export typically take some amount of time. As Bernd said in the slides, this is a EDS system, so there are certain amount of users in the clients. So the user export is typically going to take some time. So let it run through, and we can check at OS level what's happening in the background. Like I would just grep for the LSC process again and see what are the processes running. And you see there are multiple sessions activated now, which means that the parallel mode has kicked in. So we are running multiple exports at the same time here. So that saves quite a bit of time, even for the biggest systems that we have handled. The exports never take more than an hour or maybe 2. So, and you can do this for multiple configurations. So imagine you have 10 systems, ECC, BW, CRM, GTS, and you can run exports for all systems at the same time. So you're done preparing the system for database copy and restore within 1 hour for all the configurations. There might be some settings that you have to, or some tables which are not cleaned up properly. In this case, there is a table that I didn't clean up, like the statistics table, so it's going to take some time. So the first run is always a run that we have to calculate and see where we can make things better. And if we think you don't want to export the table, we can simply skip the table. And now we're going to bring SAP down again. If you don't want us to bring SAP down, you can deactivate this task and put a placeholder there saying stop SAP manually. So it's going to bring SAP down gracefully. So it's going to bring down all the app servers and then stop SAP. So let me check here on QAS if it's going down or not. Okay, so QAS is down, but the log is taking some time to populate. So let's give it a minute or 2. Okay, so it's down, and if you see a small eye icon after the stop SAP, it means that the process will wait. So you can always induce manual breakpoints or manual wait points so that you can do your checks. So if you want to say, I want to validate the exports, you can always stop there. So SAP is stopped, and now the fun part comes with regard to copy. So we have leveraged the Amazon snapshot technology to copy the volumes or snap the volumes and reattach them. So you see the copy steps, and we can always tweak these steps according to your landscape. So I'm making a list of disks on source system. I'm making a list of disks on the target system just to see what disks I have to unmount and remount. And these are basic shell scripts or Amazon CLI scripts, calling the Amazon CLI. And basically, I make a list of the disks and volumes that I have to detach and attach. So I've created the list here. It's already passed through and it's snapping the production volumes now. Let me go to the Amazon interface here, and you see the snapshots being generated. And if you don't have the snapshots created for these disks and you're creating it for the first time, it's going to take time because Amazon snapshots are always incremental. So the more snapshots you take, the quicker the snapshots will be. So I've done snapshots probably 3 or 4 times on this one, so it's just incremental. And it should be fairly quick. Maybe the disk 2 is taking a little bit time here, but it all depends upon how much time or when you're snapping the disks and things like that. So snap is done, and now I'm unfreezing the production file system. The reason being I want to snap it in a consistent state, and the snapshots are done. So now I'm creating volumes. That's fairly quick because volume creation is always easy. Now I go ahead and stop the HANA database on the target system, on the QAS system. So you see the volumes are created here, and I make sure the volumes are created correctly and they are available. Once HANA database is stopped, I go ahead and unmount the volumes. So I go ahead and detach the volumes first from OS level, then unmount the volumes from the Amazon side. So volumes are detached properly, and now I'm creating or attaching the new volumes that I've created from the production snapshot. And even that's fairly quick. This is a multi-tenant database, by the by. So we have to restore first the system DB and then the tenant database. What meant by a single tenant or single tenant database is we can do snapshots on multi-tenant, but we have to make sure that there is only one tenant on the system. So apart from system DB, we need to have only on one tenant database. In this case, I have one tenant, which is QAS. So the system DB is restored now. Now I go ahead and restore tenant database. So let's go to the HANA Studio and refresh it. So system DB is available. And let me refresh the tenant databases. They're not there yet, or tenant database QDB is not there. So system DB is available. So let's go ahead and restore the tenant database. Again, the process are repetitive. If you know that you have to restore the database again, you can continue from Y copy 001. So you don't have to rerun the exports again. So you can always repeat the steps provided you know that what you're doing. You can't repeat a step once you stop or delete or override the database. So you can't run an export once you override the database. So that's implied basically. So the tenant database is restored again. I stopped it, or we post it out, and now the post-processing is happening where we change the user stores, we clean up the work directories, and we start cleaning up the tables which are recommended by SAP to clean up, like the log tables and stuff like that. Jobs, they're coming from production, so we clean up the jobs. Again, that's something that you can always decide whether you want to keep the jobs from production or you want to restore the jobs that you backed up in the pre-phase. And now, as you see, the post-processing again is happening in parallel. Bulk of the activities are happening in parallel, which is where you get a lot of time savings. That being said, if there is not enough maintenance done on certain tables, it's going to take time. For example, if you have seen in the pre-phase, the statistics table, ST03 settings were not properly maintained, so it took some time. That's the same here. When we are importing, it's going to take a certain amount of time. So all the deletes and imports, they happen in parallel. So if you look at the OS level, like you saw earlier, it's going to be multiple sessions, and you can always define the sessions. Typically, HANA systems have high memory and CPU, so you can always bump up the sessions to 20 or 30 sessions. And we spin off multiple retrans sessions and do all the imports. So once the imports are done, and mind you, the system is not up yet, only the database is up. So that's the reason why we are able to bring the system up without setting BDCs to 0, without worrying about any emails going out, without RFCs connecting to your production system, because we didn't bring SAP up yet. Only database is up, and all we need is R3 to do all the imports. So once imports are done, once your system is up, your 75 to 80% of the configuration is back. So there is no way that your system talks to production. If by accident, if you miss any tables that you didn't put in the list here, maybe, but typically we cover out of box all the things that are very critical for having a quality system. There are certain things like we preserve, like the TMS history setting, so that we can do a delta comparison. We take care of even the simpler things like the background picture. I know it's trivial, but we just take care of that because it's just one simple table that we have to export. Licenses, we take care of export, import. RFCs, the trust certificates, we take care of them. So you see, it's just stuck with the statistics import task. So once that import task is done, it's going to, yeah, it's done now. So it's going to proceed further with the next tasks of bringing SAP up. There are some specific handlings in terms of variants for HANA, where we have to grant the import privileges to database and revoke the privileges immediately. And we delete the user buffer table so that user import and post-processing happens fine. So now SAP is coming up. So this is the first time after restore, we are bringing SAP up. So once SAP starts up, we then do the user imports and post-processing, because that is standard client export import with SAP user profile. And you can always choose the profile as well. So if you don't want to use SAP user, you want to get only the users and keep the authorizations and roles from source, you could change the profile there. So SAP is coming up. It's taking a bit time here. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask the questions. We would be more than happy to answer those questions. Okay, SAP is up. Let's give a quick check to QA systems. So let me log into QAS. And user import is happening now. So I might have to use the user from the production system. Since these are EDA systems, I should have done an load generation SGen, but I didn't do that. So that's the reason why it's taking a bit more time than normal. But typically, it should not be the case. So we are doing the user import for both client 000 and client 800. In this case, I put it only 000 because I want to speed up the process. And once the user import is done, we do post-processing on that particular client wherever we did the import. You see the compiles are happening here, which should not be the case normally.
And again, the recommendation, use the Q&A feature anytime. We have a couple of questions already coming in, so definitely stick around for the Q&A, which is going to start in 5 minutes, and keep posting your questions. I feel like there's going to be more questions than we can handle. So first come, first serve. Okay, so the user import, as you see, I've added the transport here. Our tool has added it out already, and we are waiting for the import to happen. There are certain things that we do checks on the user import process. We check whether the jobs are running properly. For example, the RDDIM PDP is running or not, because that's where most of the imports fail after or import doesn't happen at all. So we do all those checks. We check the profile is correct or not. It's taking surprisingly a little bit more time. Yeah, so we added the buffer, and then yeah, the import is done now, so it should be done. And then we do the post processing. After the import is done, bulk of the activities there, apart from BDLS, is basically checking the consistency of the system, temp checks. We also restore the log on screen. That's one of the most of the times customers would like to have that log on screen restored. So what we do is we take the timestamp of the backup that you provide, or the timestamp when we did the snaps, and then we update the log on screen automatically. So we delete the log on screen. In the preface, we have preserved the log on screen. We restore the log on screen by updating the screen with the timestamp. So everything is automated there. So if you want to update the log on screen with the backup timestamp, you just give a parameter to the tool, and the tool will go ahead and update the log on screen automatically. Okay, so it took around 4 minutes. So the post-processing is done. Post-processing is happening now. So you should see that happening here in the SEC3 transaction. So it's happening. Okay, so you see there. So that's user import, the post-processing. So these are the tasks that take a bit more time normally. So the post-processing is also done. So, and then we have the consistency check here. And then I would like to talk briefly about the BDLS, the way that we handle BDLS. So we have identified the tables. We add the big tables to exclusion list, and we drop the secondary indexes on those big tables. And then we create new indexes on those tables. We run the standard SAP program for all the small tables, and we go ahead and
set up a job for each big table that we identify. In that way, you have, it depends upon how many jobs we can schedule, of course, but you can always set the limit in the tool. And we kick off job for each specific BDLS, each specific table, and we do multiple conversions at the same time. So if you want to convert the ECC logsys, CRM logsys, BW logsys, we don't hit the table 3 times, we hit it only once and do all the 3 upgrades at the same time. So after BDLS, it's basically restore the exclusion table, and then we do restore the BD54 and CUA and partner profiles after BDLS, because we don't want to have that unique constraint violation issues. So after that is basically, we do provide some templates where you can add your own reports or add your own jobs. The tool can schedule the jobs for you. Apart from that, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And as Ben said, feel free to go ahead and ask questions, and hand over to you.
Great job, Vamsi. I have one slide as a summary slide. There are more things we could do to summarize the presentation, but I want to focus on just the business value, because at a certain point, this is software that costs money. So the business want to know what are they going to get back for the money they invest. So apart from the slides I mentioned in the beginning of how IT operation really changed to becoming a service broker, some of the points are really the overall optimization. We want to automate as much as we can. It's the advanced standardization. If again, my favorite example is looking how Amazon Web Services and Azure and all the cloud providers are organizing themselves. There are no people doing manual tasks. Everything is orchestrated. Everything is software based. You request a service, you get the service, and all the IT team at Amazon Web Services is doing is making sure the infrastructure is right and doing exception handling. It's reducing cost because you basically have additional basis administrators, which are installations of a software which are helping you doing the system refresh. It's highly predictable because it's a predefined workflow. It executes the same every time unless you change the workflow or unless something dramatic changed in the infrastructure. It's highly traceable. It's not somebody executed something on the system and you have to figure out what was happening. Everything is logged. Everything is documented in the reports. Everything is predefined and comes out as a standard report. It reduces risk. You can deliver your refreshes faster. My prediction is we went from system refreshes, manual from, let's say, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, optimized maybe 10 days, to automated to a couple of days, 3, 4, 5 days. With HANA, we are really looking at reducing refreshes from days to hours. I think a refresh for a HANA system within 6 to 15, 16 hours, 6 to 8 hours is not unrealistic. You have super fast hardware. There's really nothing that's slowing us down anymore. And then you can streamline your SAP as operation, automate as much as possible. With that, I want to open the Q&A session. We have a couple of minutes left, and while the questions are coming in, a quick note. There are more Libelle webcasts scheduled for this week. There's an IDOC monitoring webcast about one of our other tools. There is a data masking webcast on Thursday. And there is a migration webcast specifically for Amazon Web Services on Friday. You can also schedule a demo anytime directly with us. So with that, let's look at the questions we got in. And the first question I'm going to ask Vamsi is the question around tenant DBs in HANADB. And let me just read out the question. I think it's interesting for everybody. As you mentioned, if multiple tenants are in the HANADB, you want at a refresh only one tenant. What do you recommend to handle if you have multiple tenants in the HANADB? Moving the other tenants to a different HANA system first? And I guess the question is if you can refresh a single tenant individually without impacting the other tenants. Vamsi, I have no idea. It's probably something you can answer very good.
We could always do multi-tenant refreshes. That's not a concern. The only challenge around that is we cannot leverage the snapshot technology. But you can always do the export import. Honestly, our export import is as good as snapshot technology from the tests and from the use cases that we have seen with customers. Snapshot is a bit quicker, I would say, in terms of restore of snapping and copying the disks. Other than that, backup restore is the way to go if you have multi-tenant.
Okay. The next question, kind of generic, how do you handle security settings? And I think it's probably referring to the SAP security, not to our security. Vamsi?
When you talk about our security, I didn't exactly get their question in terms of security, whether it's application security. The whole system copy application that you saw runs in your system, so it's as good as your system security. When you talk about the users that you give to the tool and the other things, we do have an authorization document which we provide the set of authorizations that we require for some of the programs or some of the ABAPs in the workflow to run. Apart from that, the tool is completely running on-premise. You, of course, can do or install the tool on cloud, and that's something which is not in scope for the tool. The security comes along with the box or with the system.
Great. So a question I want to prioritize, because I should have put that on my slide. If we're going to be at TechEd in October, yes, Libelle is at TechEd. So if any of you is at TechEd, we are on the show floor, and feel free to stop by anytime. Vamsi is going to be on the booth. I'm going to be on the booth most of the time. So feel free to stop by. And there was 2 more questions I have here. One is the post refresh. Can we change the schema name back to original? Like if it was SAP QAS1 post refresh, it would change to SAP PID1. So can I change it back to SAP QAS1?
Typically, no. I don't see a reason why you would want to do it. There are some SAP notes which tell you how to do that in Studio, but no, as you see in the use case that we have defined, it's always the same schema names between source and target.
Okay. One more question. One query, SAP already providing these options with PCA, export, import. What is the major difference between the two? So the question is, SAP provides, used to be called LVM, Landscape Virtualization Manager. Now it's called Llama, Landscape Manager. And within that, there's a tool called PCA, Post Copy Automation, Export, Import. So what is the difference between this and Libelle? So Libelle is a third-party tool, a third-party alternative you could use instead of PCA. Now, there are a couple of differences, I think, which are important to consider. So our software runs outside SAP, and I think we see ourselves more and more, specifically with cloud and orchestration, as an orchestration platform rather than a specific SAP tool that runs on a specific SAP system. So you have this huge flexibility that you have this server you install separately, you have the workflow defined, and then you execute steps inside SAP, and you also execute steps outside SAP. If you look at the SAP interface, the SAP option, and you compare it with what you saw in the demo, you could probably tell, and we are convinced it's much easier, it's much simpler, it's much leaner, it's much more flexible and simpler to use and simpler to integrate, because you don't really have to change your workflow, because the workflow you probably already have defined in a refresh document. We simply automate the workflow you have. You don't have to change anything in your infrastructure. Next question is Vamsi's favorite question, is can the BW source system connections be automated during the post-refresh procedure?
We do have some tasks where we try to preserve the source system connections, especially focused around the RSA one where all the source systems are listed. That being said, you might have to regenerate the settings and make sure the connections are working fine. There is a bit of automation around it, but I have seen it on a wide spectrum, and some systems on some configuration it works without touching the settings. On some systems where we work with customers, we have to readjust them manually. So I don't say we don't do it. At the same time, we have to watch out for those settings manually.
I think last question, we have 2 more minutes. And I don't know if we have, it's a really good question. I do want to know the answer. How does Libelle handle the scale out system copy refresh to the scale up system? And I think these are referring to the concepts of cloud services where you can scale out the systems to multiple HANA instances and then scale up to higher memory, higher CPU. I don't think we really have the answer because there are so many scenarios. One of the things I did want to mention is throwing in one more concept, and we probably have a separate conversation. But if you think about cloud and if you think about BDLS, one of the things I always wanted to implement, and I'm looking for a customer to do that with us, if your BDLS is still too slow and you run this on Amazon Web Services, you can simply move your QAS system to the biggest instance that is available on Amazon Web Services for half a day or a couple of hours, run the BDLS, do the conversions, and then move it back to a smaller system. So this is one of the examples I think would relate to scale up and scale out, more on the scale up thing, but we would look at that separately. We hit the top of the hour. I appreciate everybody joining the webinar. Again, contact me, contact Vamsi anytime. If you have any questions, meet us at SAP TechEd. There's going to be a repeat session, I think, in October of this session. And I look forward to hear from everybody. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the presentation. And again, thanks everybody. And thanks Vamsi for a great demo. Bye-bye.